Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, I hope you're having a fantastic day and an even better week. Today, I pulled a topic to talk about that is not usual, but hopefully you can find some value in it. Some of you will probably be able to relate to it once they start going into it, and then others of you, hey, enjoy the left turn down a dusty road of topics, right? But no, hopefully you can see how this can benefit you not only in organizations, but also within pockets of culture, also, any groups that you're associated with in the community and so forth, uh, to include, your circle, your family, your relationships, right? Just if it applies or if you can see where the dots connect, then let them work, let those work for you. Let this work for you. Okay. So I'm going to call this the psychology of visualization. and and I don't know, this isn't an official psychology topic, right? This is just me talking about visualization, right? And to explain to you how it may help you and your team, because I've found it works for me, it helps me. It's not difficult, it's not something cosmic or anything like that. It's something that you can apply, and it can tap into your creative side. You can have fun with it. You can use it for so many things, and you already are doing this. I'm 99% certain in some capacity you are already doing this. And I'm going to use an example to begin with to kind of tap into a practical, pragmatic element to visualization. Imagine you're driving home from work, and we'll say you have 30 to 40-minute commute, okay? And you have, there's a dinner you're going out to, right? So you got to get home, got to get cleaned up, right? You got to get back on the road to go to XYZ location for this dinner, right? Whether it's with your significant other or yourself, it doesn't matter. But you got to get home and do the things, right? Feed the dog, cat, whatever you got, right? The goldfish, all the things, right? The bird, the prawn in the backyard, whatever. But so you're booking it home, right? Driving at a safe clip. And all of a sudden, on this particular route that you drive home, more often than not, on this route, all of a sudden, car's backed up, right? It's not a freeway, but the cars are backed up and you're not sure what's going on. So, and you've just come, to the stop, to a stop traffic, and there's a line of cars that's probably, close to a half mile long. So you're not necessarily seeing what's happening, but then you can kind of see up around, and you might see there's some emergency vehicles, and something probably not too favorable has occurred. Sadly, this happens way too often, right? But you come to a stop, and you're not insensitive, but you also have to get home, right? You've got, and you don't know the situation, right? It could be nothing at all, but anyway, so you're stopped. Your brain, like it or not, whether you're conscious of it or not, is going to automatically go into what are other routes for me to get home, right? And your brain is searching its visual map of your experiences driving around, let's say this area, and your past experiences driving different routes potentially. It's going to tap into that, and it's visually going to go flip, 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 map. Oh, back up, back, flip around. I go back, quarter mile, turn right, go up the road, whatever, right? Your brain is going to automatically do this. You don't even have to ask your brain to do this. You don't have to sit there and go, I wonder how I might get home. Because there's a sense of urgency already, because maybe you're a little running behind anyway, your brain's going to automatically go into problem solving mode, right? How do I accomplish this? How do we figure this out? Well, it's tapping into so many things, but visually, right? You're seeing the road, you're seeing these flashes are coming to you. And you use that and you go, oh, okay, you flip around and you go home. We are natural problem solvers. And our ability to visualize is really innate within us, right? It's probably part of our survival, the biology of our survival, right? And what we need to do to be able to survive situations, we'll visualize, right? We may visualize, we may use, call upon our memory. Hey, just like we did with that, right? But it may be something else. And driving's an easy one because we all, drive, and well, most all of us drive and and or travel, right? And and that sort of thing. It might be you go for a walk and a similar situation happens, right? Or you're trying to find a friend's house that you haven't been to in a long time, and maybe it's you haven't been there in a long time, and you've only been there a couple, 2 or 3 times, and you kind of remember. Right now, these days we can use our GPS and kind of cheat, right? But but for the most part, you can kind of visually remember. Oh, it kind of looked like this. I remember. So sometimes you're using old school rules, not GPS. You're using some of your frame of reference, right? It might be the frame of reference of where a mountain is, right? Landmarks, that sort of thing, right? Using landmarks to find your way. You have a couple landmarks, you can triangulate your position, right? So those things are interesting for travel and getting around, right? But now within your organization, now think about this. Have you ever thought about visualizing the pathway? Obviously I'm going back in time a little bit. Back when we used paper, some still do a little bit of paper, but back when we used primarily paper, could you visualize where this particular folder or file was going as it made its way through a system, right? For sign-offs, for example, right? Sometimes we still do these things, but but not as much because we have PDFs and whatnot. But you could visualize where this folder might be. And we tap into this too when have you ever lost your keys? You haven't lost your keys. You probably amongst the few. Okay. But you lost your keys, and what do? You visualize. You're recalling the visuals of where was I last? What did I have on? A lot of visual flood then, right? You get flooded with all these visuals, and you end up eventually finding it. It's always the last place you look, right? but but those are some pragmatic examples. But then, of course, within your organizations too, if you're trying to solve a problem and you have a big whiteboard, love a whiteboard, but you have a big whiteboard and you're with your team. And I've done this in Kaizen events and other brainstorming events and so forth, but where you're basically putting all the variables down and doing your, Ishikawa diagrams and all the things, and you're getting everything out there and starting to brainstorm and everything and visualizing the process, right? You might map out the process, right? The current state of the process, right? Whether you're using it, doing a flow chart with stickies and all the things manually or electronic if you want, or whether you're actually just mapping out the routes, right? Travel routes it could be the routes that you use for trucking. It could be all sorts of things, but you use visualization, mapping things out. You could say, okay, well, how could we lay out our operation more efficiently and effectively, right? You can go out to the actual site and do this, but you can also do it, with your team in a meeting and basically just draw it out and do some sketches and collaborate, right? So visualization is super important because it allows you to kind of imagine, and there is a bit of an imagining. I remember a couple decades or more ago when Halo was a game that Xbox had. So a little little shout out to anybody who's played Halo, and played it quite a bit with a buddy of mine who lived in another state, and um, but and my son and his son and so forth. But we would play Halo, right? And you can imagine, just like with video games, you can imagine, okay, what I'm going to do when I get into a certain thing, and that kind of thing, right? So you can imagine. But I always, I would be playing the game, and then I would think, oh, this game could be better, right? And this is where you kind of imagine, right? This game could be better, and you got to where you could build these little maps and stuff. But you could imagine setting up an area. So in your mind's eye, you can imagine, like, say, a gymnasium-sized space with nothing in it, a little bit like the Matrix, right, with just white room, right? But imagine that this open space, and now how do we want to set this open space up? What do we want to put in this open space? Had programs for designing homes back in the day when I had it on computer and so forth, and you could, of course, you could design a home and put the walls in and the whole thing, your furniture and all the things, right? And you could do that, and it was kind of fun to play with. Well, it was your imagination, right? So visualization and imagination now, using those productively and pragmatically to solve problems that you have. Some of these problems might be visualizing numbers. Now, some of you may be, finance folks and so on. Have you ever visualized numbers? Have you ever visualized formulas? Right now, that's some folks. That's not for everybody, right? But there are times that this is something to me. So whatever video this is at 12:42, you're learning about this, and I've never talked about it before. I would see percentages, right? So if you ask me, hey, what do you think the percentage of, XYZ is? I'd say, oh, about this. And I would be pretty doggone close very often, more often than not, actually. And I used to play a game a long time ago with somebody that it would be to guess the receipt at the checkout, right? And see who could get closest, right? And it wasn't spot on. Obviously, there's a lot of, you're talking about pennies, down to the pennies, right? But there was times that I was pretty doggone close. And so I've been pretty intuitive about seeing, being able to convert visually what I'm seeing into a number. And then that sparks a bit of an interest in, hey, I wonder if there's something here. Let me get the data, right? So this would lead me to collect the data, because you can't just go on that intuitive, right? That might be an indicator to look there, but it isn't the end all be all. That isn't you don't want to rely on that 100%, right? That's just like my canine instincts, if you will. But it would lead me to that. Then I would say, okay, well, let's get the data and let's see if it leads somewhere. And to this day, when I've used AI, and I put a couple papers on here and so forth, it's seeing the question in my mind's eye based on what I'm seeing in culture, and then asking the appropriate question, and then having the AI freak out because it's like, oh my gosh, yes, these are connected. These things are related. There's interrelationship here. And then being able to then pull in more information, being able to ask the right question. That tends to be my strength, but it's also probably your strength. You may not even know it's a strength of yours. It's like a muscle, right? You don't know what your strengths are until you've exercised those muscles. So you might test yourself. I guess you tempt yourself, but test yourself and try to figure out some of these things, little brain games, right? And what's funny is I'm not a puzzle guy. Like, I'm not a guy who's going to sit there and do a bunch of crossword puzzles and all that kind of stuff. But the puzzle of solving larger problems is something that fascinates me. So, and creating better systems to make things work better, right? Basically. But that's an intuitive thing. But there's visualization that is also interrelated in there, right? It's opening your mind's eye up to being able to see the answer. You could essentially ask yourself a question. It's like, I wonder how many trees there are, or how much deforestation has occurred in the last 100 years in your state. And then just ask yourself that question and just close your eyes and think. And then what comes into your mind? Probably 15%. And then look it up and see what it is, right? You can play this game with yourself and you can use different things, different topics, different, whatever. And it's a muscle that you can use, but there's an element of intuition there, but there's also an element of visualization, right? As well. So anyway, visualization can help with problem solving. You can map things out. You can, using a blank slate, a blank whiteboard or big, bunch of giant sticky pads, whatever, or that like not construction paper, but the roll paper. I use that for events. We just roll it out and then tape it to the wall or pin it to the wall, however you do it, and map out your current state, right? Map out your current state. Use sticky little stickies on there, right now to each of the steps. That's your current state. Then what's your future state? This is part of doing a Kaizen event, but you can do it even informally, just for yourself. If you're a department leader or even a plant manager or whomever, you can map it out. You can map out, a process that you do if you're an entrepreneur and say, okay, this is what it is now. How can we make it better? Well, let's do it this way instead. If we do it this way, it takes less time, it's less resource. You can make it more efficient, right? And you can do it very casually. It doesn't have to be super formal, okay? In fact, the least formal, the better, except when it comes to collecting data and doing observations. If it's a complex thing, you want to get in and get good observations, a good number of observations, because you want to be able to, really ascertain what's going on, right? And then, of course, remember there's a bit of a bias there, right? Not confirmation bias, but when people are being watched, right? Hey, I'm going to watch you do this just so I can get a feel for what's going on. People will just perform a little bit better, and that's fine. But it won't always align, because when you start to do the math, you'll say, well, we're doing a lot better than what our end result is. And then you find, okay, there's probably about a 10% uptick, right? Just because they were being watched. And that's fine. But you can at least get a feel for the baseline, right? To improve it. And to make things easier, right? So you can ask somebody, hey, how can, if you're out at a site and you say, hey, how can we make this easier for you? The person might look around. Well, if I had a thing that, right? Their imagination and creativity might start to insert some, creative answers, because they're visualizing now, right? But sometimes it's just asking the right question. And if you're, a site leader, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, and you ask your team, hey, what could we do to make this job more effective, more efficient, easier? By easier, you're wasting less energy, right? To do it makes more sense, burns up the least amount of resources, is better for the customer, because we have so many different variations for industries. Asking these questions of your team unlocks that visualization. And then if they're unsure, you say, well, hey, I tell you what, just marinate on it for a couple of days, and I'll come back and we'll talk again in a couple of days. And then that you've just opened up, you've just unlocked an opportunity for them to imagine now how it could be better. And they might think, at first, they might think, oh, I'm not really sure. But after a while, they think about it. You give them that, easy assignment, really, they're going to come up with stuff. And if you open up that opportunity for your team, you are going to find, this is me guessing, of course, because I don't know what industry you are, but I'm going to bet your individual departments or individual processes specific to whatever you're talking to them about, you're probably going to see about a 7 to 10, 11% bump in productivity, efficiency, or reduced waste. It's just, it's just the way it works out. And it potentially can be sustainable, and that you can see that reflect overall in your entire organization. And that's kind of neat. That's just a simple one, right? You can do this on large scale. You can do multiple ones throughout your entire facility, which leads me to remind you that this is a service I actually do to help teams and so forth. And you'll see my information at the end of this video. So highly encourage you to reach out if you're really wanting to get your team tuned up and tap into some of these things and see if we can optimize your operation. And on that note, folks, I hope you hit that good green domino 3 to 5 times a day to uplift, motivate, inspire, and just encourage one another. When you do this, not only you help transform culture, but you're transforming yourself. But also remember, we can't transform anything on the outside if we're not willing to transform on the inside. Very important to remember. All right, folks, have a fantastic day. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.